Okay, let's go on to aloe vera. Aloe vera, how many of you have an aloe vera plant in your home? At least half of you. And is it just for the beauty?
It's healing.
No? What do you use it for?
Burns when I burn myself in the kitchen.
Excellent. She mentioned burns for the camera. Burns because it heals it. It takes the pain out of it. Anything else? Yeah?
Stomach.
You've been to some of my lectures. All right. When I talk about aloe, I usually talk about the stomach aspect. That's something that most people are not aware of. In fact, I at one time said I wished everybody that I met when I was starting to sell herbs had a stomach ulcer or a stomach problem. Because if you will take the aloe plant, it's usually in a juice form, and you'll take 1/8 to 1/4 of a cup about 3 minutes before eating, it will alleviate almost any type of stomach problems. So forget about the burns, the cuts. Think about how it can work on your stomach. Oh, but my stomach is ulcerated and it's bleeding. I'll just give you another hint. I'm jumping ahead. Add 6 to 8 drops of lobelia to that 1/8 of a cup of aloe juice, and you will heal that ulcer. Why? Well, I'll cover it in a moment, but lobelia is an antispasmodic. What that means, it's going to slow down the work of that stomach. Its job is to work like a great big cement mixer. And so you've got an ulcer, and now you've got this food. I'm going to cover more on that in a moment. But if you can slow it down, and if you can give it some aloe, aloe will heal it. The lobelia will slow the spasmodic activity, and you can heal a stomach ulcer. Very interesting. Okay. About 35 years ago, I'm going to back up a little bit. We're still on aloe. I had a meeting here at my house. It was of herbalists, doctors, and health professionals, about 70 people. I used to live in a small apartment. This is a Gambrel type house. Up here, you could never fit more than a half a dozen into that apartment. And so I used my mother's goat barn with goats and chickens still in it. It sort of smelled, but I cleaned it up as best I could because I wanted to have a meeting and I wanted to talk about aloe. So at that point, what happened is I, out of my own pocket, contacted a research scientist. His name was Mark Pedersen. He was working on a book at the time. It's now a book that I refer doctors and pharmacists to called Nutritional Herbology. And that book lists all of the ingredients, the vitamins, the minerals, everything that's found in the various herbs. I paid for him to come out. I paid for his time. I paid for his flight. And I had 70 people show up. Most of them were herbalists and doctors and people that were quite interested in herbs. I told him what I wanted him to do. I want you to give me some of the background of herbs. Why do they work? How does it? And of course, that was his whole book. So he came out. I said, the big thing 35 years ago, it's still here now, was aloe vera. Everybody wanted aloe vera, and everybody had the best aloe vera, and you had all kinds of prices, but nobody had second best. They never do. And so I said, how do I determine a good aloe vera? I said, I'd like you to address that. Yes?
Does that come in teas, aloe vera?
It comes in a capsule that you could make into a tea, but most people buy it in a liquid form. All right? By the way, if you have questions, if they're short and easy, I'll answer them. If it's going to be involved, I say save it to the end. But here at this point, he gave all of the reasons why herbs work, the science behind it. That'd never been done before. His original work, Nutritional Herbology by Mark Pedersen. Now there's dozens of books out there. And finally, about 3 or 4 hours in, he got to the subject of aloe. Now, when I sent out my invitation to people, I said, what I want you to do, because they all had their favorites, and Nature Sunshine had some too, but I was selling very little of it. I'll tell you why in a moment. I didn't know what he was going to say. And so I told him, bring in your favorite. And Mark was supposed to tell us, how do you determine a good aloe from a not good aloe? All right? He's talking for about 2 or 3. He says, Bill, will you go get me a drink of water? He said, I'd prefer either distilled or reverse osmosis. I'm getting a little thirsty already. He was many hours. He ran. I ran in. I got him his drink. I brought it out. In the meantime, what he had done is he had pulled out a strip of aloe. You can see what it looks like here. And when he took that aloe out, he did what we called, he filleted it in front of us. And then he took and he squeezed it and he put the juice in this little small, what do you call it, beaker? Is that what they call those things that they put stuff into? And, test tube. That sounds good, great. And so he put it in there. And then he had a chemical. I found out later, I didn't know at the time, it's actually a urine sugar test tablet. I had to call him and ask him about it. And he put a little bit of this chemical in there, and we saw a slight color change. His comment was, would you say that this is natural? When you want a good aloe, do you want to see how natural it is? We all basically agreed. He said, would you agree this is a good one? He said, now Bill has asked you to bring your favorite aloes with you. Who's done it? Well, the hands went up. So one by one, they came up. He'd take a sample out of their bottle. He'd put it in the test tube. He'd add the same chemical to it, and yet all kinds of different colors. Each time the color would come up, he would tell you what had been added and why the color changed. Why wasn't it like the first one? And he did that all the way through. The absolute biggest selling aloe on the market and the most expensive, I won't mention the name, but it was, I'll read what it said on the label, odorless, organic, all natural, tasteless, every single buzzword that all of us want to see on the label. And believe me, the manufacturers know what you want to see. This had absolutely every buzzword you could think on it. He took a sample of it, put it in the test tube, added the chemical to it. You know what happened? It came out the same color, almost identical to the water that he'd asked me to get him. He smiled and he looked up. He says, that's a very honest label. It's odorless, organic, all natural, and tasteless. And he paused. He says, and useless. All right. So then he asked me, Bill, he says, would you bring me one of yours? So I brought mine over. He took this out, put it into the test tube, added the chemical. You couldn't tell the difference between the one he filleted in front of us and the one from Nature Sunshine. But the one from Nature Sunshine did not have natural on it. It did not have organic on it. And it definitely didn't say tasteless, because it didn't taste very good. And I can go on down the line. It was everything you don't want to see, but it matched. And so since then we've done muscle testing on it. It will outperform every aloe out there. But even this was a scientific test. You could see that it was different. But what it did have on the label is that it contained sodium benzoate. That's a preservative. Most of us, myself included, do not want sodium benzoate in our food. This was right up the same size print as everything else. It also had ascorbic acid. Well, actually, that's vitamin C. That's not too bad. So then he pointed out, why not the color change? He said, you can add various chemicals to various foods. They vary. He says up to 10%, and you don't have to put it on the label. Nature Sunshine, in their aloe vera, uses 1/10 of 1%, and that's a preservative. You have to use a preservative in any type of fluid, or you'll be very, very sick. The ascorbic acid is why they could use so little of the sodium benzoate. But the point was the integrity of a manufacturer. This is when my confidence began to build. If they will put on the label that it contains sodium benzoate, same size print as aloe and everything else, knowing that we don't want to see it, and they never made any of the claims that I'm bringing out to you. I got this from somebody outside. I said, that's integrity. What if a person had an allergy to sodium benzoate or something else? That began to tell me that I trust the company. Anyway, I said enough on aloe. I had to give you that personal deal.